Before the rain fell and the ark floated upon endless waters, there was a world unlike anything we know today. A world teeming with ancient beauty and staggering knowledge, where humans lived for centuries, giants walked among them, and angels descended to mingle with mankind. It was an age of invention, of wild creatures and breathtaking landscapes, yet also an age of deep rebellion and forgotten faith. What did this mysterious pre-flood world truly look like? And what can we learn from a civilization that grew so great only to vanish beneath the waves? Let us journey back to the very beginning, before the flood, before the wrath, to a time when humanity first learned to build and destroy. In the silence after Eden, the earth was still fresh, the soil untouched by iron or machine. The first humans walked its plains with wonder and innocence, and though they had lost paradise, they had not yet forgotten it. The world before the flood of Noah was not a primitive wasteland, but a realm of immense potential, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. It was a time of beginnings, of new life and boundless opportunity, but also a time of descent, of subtle shifts in the heart of mankind that would, in time, summon the greatest judgment the world has ever known. It began with a garden left behind in a couple who bore the weight of exile. Adam and Eve, now mortal and clothed in skins, began a new chapter on an untested earth. They had sons and daughters, and among them were Cain and Abel. Abel was gentle, a shepherd who offered his best to the Creator. Cain, a farmer of the land, grew bitter when his offering was not favored. Jealousy became rage, and rage became the first murder. The soil, still young, was stained with blood. Abel's life ended not by war or accident, but by the hands of his own brother. And from that moment, the tone of human history shifted. Cain wandered, marked by God but not destroyed. In the land of Nod, east of Eden, he built a city, a remarkable feat in a time still so close to creation. He named it after his son, Enoch. This city, the first ever recorded in Scripture, was a cradle of culture and defiance. While Cain's line expanded, so did its hunger for independence from God. The city became a symbol of early human ambition and rebellion. Yet not all of humanity followed this path. Adam and Eve bore another son, Seth, whose line sought to call upon the name of the Lord. For generations, these two lines, the descendants of Cain and those of Seth, would grow side by side, one marked by pride and innovation, the other by quiet devotion. Civilization was being born, and with it came the first great divide in human spirit. The world in these days was not marked by cavemen and stone tools, as modern minds often imagine. It was a place of genius, endurance, and creation. Scripture reveals that early humans pioneered many aspects of society we still see today, and even some we can barely comprehend. Jabal, a descendant of Cain, introduced livestock management and the use of tents, founding the concept of pastoral life. Jubal, his brother, crafted instruments, the lyre and the pipe, showing that even in an age so near to Eden, humanity had discovered melody and rhythm. Music, in its earliest form, was born not out of leisure, but as a reflection of the soul's yearning, perhaps even a memory of paradise. Then came Tubal-Cain, the first metallurgist. He forged tools from bronze and iron, and more ominously, he shaped the earliest weapons. With fire and stone and metal, humans began to master their environment, but also each other. These early blacksmiths were not crude laborers, but brilliant inventors. Their minds were not dulled by time or evolution. In fact, they may have been sharper, their understanding deeper, their memory longer. They lived not decades, but centuries, entire lifetimes of learning, building, perfecting. Consider Methuselah, the longest living man recorded, who lived 969 years. What wisdom, what knowledge could a person accumulate in nearly a millennium? In that stretch of time, one could master dozens of disciplines, build cities, cultivate fields, compose symphonies, and teach generations. This was not a time of darkness, but a golden era of human potential, and yet also a time of creeping shadows. For alongside all this progress came corruption. The line of Cain grew not just in numbers, but in arrogance. Lamech, a descendant of Cain, became the first polygamist, a sign of shifting social values. He boasted of his violence, declaring he had killed a man for merely wounding him. The echo of Cain's crime grew louder in each generation. Society was unraveling from within. The Nephilim walked the land with strength unmatched, and their presence further corrupted the world. Legends outside the Bible, from ancient Jewish texts to mythologies across cultures, suggest that these beings introduced mankind to secret knowledge, forbidden sciences, advanced warfare, magic, and deception. The line between spiritual and physical, natural and supernatural, was blurred, and the earth groaned under the weight of this unnatural union. Imagine a world where angels once walked beside humans, where men lived for centuries and giants roamed freely. A world where music and metallurgy, agriculture and architecture all flourished, but where sin grew just as fast. It was a world of paradox, beautiful and broken, enlightened yet lost. The skies above it had not yet opened, but a storm was coming, a storm to end the world that was. God watched, he waited. The Creator, patient and just, allowed the drama of humanity to unfold for generations. He saw the hearts of men, how their thoughts were bent toward evil continually. The light of devotion flickered in a few, but the vast majority had chosen a different path. The world before the flood had everything: time, knowledge, power, divine intervention. And yet it lacked the one thing that mattered most: obedience. It was not ignorance that doomed them, but arrogance. They had all the tools, all the warning signs. They had seen their own brothers fall, their fathers boast of bloodshed, their neighbors twist what was pure into perversion. They had heard the whispers of the righteous, the warnings from prophets like Enoch. Yet they pressed on, building cities, forging swords, singing songs to gods of their own making. And so, while humanity reached its early peak, the ground trembled beneath its feet. The waters waited, the skies remained closed, but not forever. The flood was no accident. It was not nature out of control. It was judgment, long delayed, but fully earned. The world before the flood was a masterpiece tarnished, a place where angels fell, giants rose, men lived for centuries, and yet could not find their way back to God. It was a time of mystery, grandeur, and sorrow, the age of beginnings and the beginning of the end. The world before the flood had reached a boiling point. Every field that bloomed with food, every forge that shaped tools, every hand that strummed a harp, all existed in a time teetering on the edge of judgment. The people of that age, though gifted with vast years and even vaster knowledge, had begun to live as though God no longer watched. Cities grew bolder, giants strutted among men, and the whisper of righteousness became an unwelcome sound drowned in the noise of endless feasting and pride. But amid this tide of rebellion stood a man whose life formed a sharp contrast to the world around him. His name was Noah, a quiet light in a time of thickening darkness. He was not the loudest, nor the most powerful. He didn't rule cities or command legions of followers. But what set Noah apart was something far more profound. He listened. He listened when others mocked. He walked with God when others fled. And when the heavens remained still, and the warnings of judgment seemed a distant myth, Noah believed. He came from the line of Seth, the faithful lineage that, though increasingly overshadowed by Cain's descendants, had not forgotten the Creator. Noah's great-grandfather Enosh had walked so closely with God that he was taken away, bypassing death altogether. That legacy still whispered through Noah's heart. He lived not for pleasure or prestige, but in obedience. He was, as Scripture tells us, a righteous man, blameless in his generation. And in a generation like his, such words carry deep meaning. When God spoke to Noah, it wasn't in thunder or fire. It was in clarity, sobering and heavy, a warning not only of judgment, but of purpose. The world would be cleansed. Humanity had filled the earth with violence, corrupted the gifts it had been given, and mingled with forces it was never meant to touch. The time had come, but God would not erase without preserving. A remnant would be saved. A new beginning would be carved out from the ashes. And Noah was chosen to carry that hope. The instruction was simple in command, but monumental in scale. Build an ark, not a boat, not a raft, an ark, massive and precise. Over 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The task would require years, perhaps decades, of planning, cutting, shaping, and joining. Every beam that rose was a testament of faith. Every nail, a quiet sermon. While the rest of the world danced, laughed, and waged war, Noah built. The ridicule came quickly. People scoffed at the old man in his foolish wooden vessel. Rain, they said. What rain? Water falling from the sky? The heavens had never opened like that. Their mockery was constant, cruel, and loud. But Noah kept building. He taught his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, to cut timber, shape it according to God's blueprint, and prepare for something they had never seen. His wife and his sons' wives stood beside him in faith. They were a family of survivors, though they didn't yet know it. For every day that hammer met wood, a countdown echoed silently across the earth. And then came the animals. They arrived not by accident, but by divine direction. From the wild plains, from the deep forests, from the skies above and burrows below, they came, in pairs and sevens, creeping, crawling, soaring, and stampeding. The ark, built to impossible specifications, welcomed them all. Birds nested in its rafters. Beasts found place in its shadow. And still the world laughed. But a change was coming. It began with a sound, perhaps a rumble deep in the earth. The sky, once calm, began to churn. The heavens darkened with a wrath long withheld. And then, with a crack that silenced every scoffer, the first drop fell. It was not a sprinkle. It was not a shower. It was a rupture. The fountains of the great deep burst open, and the windows of heaven were unleashed. Rain fell like judgment in liquid form, unrelenting, endless. The ground itself betrayed its occupants, heaving forth water from beneath while the skies poured down from above. Rivers swelled, hills vanished, and cities began to dissolve beneath waves. Noah and his family entered the ark, and the door, not closed by human hands but sealed by God himself, shut them inside. Outside, terror replaced laughter. Panic swept through crowds that once mocked, but it was too late. The ark, massive and silent, became the only refuge on an earth drowning in its own defiance. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain did not cease. Water covered every mountain, every forest, every monument once built in pride. The Nephilim, with all their size and strength, could not outswim divine justice. The cities of Cain's line, with their music and metal, sank beneath silence. Every voice, every beast, every child, every elder, all were silenced, save 8 souls and a menagerie of animals inside a vessel floating upon judgment. And then, the rain stopped. But the flood did not vanish overnight. The waters remained, blanketing the earth in stillness. The world, once bustling and noisy, had become a mirror of heaven, sky and water meeting in every direction. The ark drifted, guided by unseen hands, until it rested upon the mountains of Ararat. The flood had purged the earth, but it also prepared it for renewal. Inside the ark, time moved differently. Noah waited, watched, and sent forth birds. A raven flew out, restless and unfocused. Then a dove, which returned with nothing. Then again, and this time, an olive leaf, soft and green. Life had begun again. The earth, though drenched in sorrow, was stirring with resurrection. When the door finally opened, it was not just the beginning of a new chapter. It was the birth of a new world. But this was not merely a story of water and wood, of beasts and floods. The tale of the pre-flood world carries with it echoes that reach forward through time, warnings wrapped in history. For Jesus himself would later say, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man." He described a future where humanity would once again eat and drink, marry and give in marriage, and live as though nothing would ever change. A future blind to approaching judgment. A future that looks suspiciously like the past. The pre-flood world was not primitive. It was advanced. It was not ignorant. It was defiant. Its people were not fooled, and they were proud. And that pride, that blindness, that refusal to hear even the whispers of the divine, sealed their fate. It is easy to forget that the flood did not come suddenly. It was preceded by warnings, by prophets, by decades of preparation. God waited. He waited for hearts to turn, for minds to change. But only one man listened. One family obeyed. And so the flood became not only a judgment, but a filter, a purifier. It washed away not just cities and songs and animals and giants, but every excuse. Today we still uncover whispers of that world. Ancient ruins, fossilized forests, tales of giants and sky beings from cultures scattered across the globe. These aren't just myths, they're memories, echoes of a forgotten time when heaven met earth, and earth chose to forget heaven. The ark, resting now in the quiet of history, remains a symbol of divine mercy, a reminder that even in judgment, God saves, that even in wrath, there is refuge, and that no matter how far humanity drifts, there will always be a voice calling it back, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in warnings, and sometimes, when all else fails, in rain.